How's it going? I'm JT.
I'm Lauren.
And we're the Burnsides.
Burnside.
No, that's horrible.
Do you want to do it again?
No, we can do it. This is how we work. Okay.
I was fortunate enough to grow up in a Christian home. I started attending Raiseville Baptist at 1 week old. Was there through high school. I was very active in GAs. We were there pretty much anytime the doors were open. One summer at GA camp, I was, I think, 7. A lot of my friends went down during the invitation, and I just definitely felt God pulling at my heart. And so when a lot of my friends went down, I was like, okay, good, I can go down with them. So I made a decision that night. When I got home, though, I kind of talked to my parents about it, and I think they were a little bit apprehensive about my age and that I went down with a large group. So we spent a lot of time together and really talking about what that meant and what the decision I was making really meant long term. And I'm really grateful they did, because I know for a fact that I made that decision and I knew what I was saying and I knew what I was praying for that night that my dad and I prayed that prayer together. So I'm very grateful for that. And it's interesting because we're kind of going through the same thing with our son Mason right now. So it's cool to see him asking those same questions and going through those same emotions with him, and that we can really mentor him and do what we feel like God let us have him for, was to share Christ with him and ultimately let him be a part of the kingdom with us.
So I had quite a different experience growing up. My parents did not raise me in the church. We didn't talk about Jesus. We weren't even Creasters. We didn't do any of that stuff, right? They were always arguing. They were very vocal. I also got bullied an awful lot. Just about every day I was getting picked on. Somebody was trying to hit me. They were constantly making fun of me, pushing me down, even all through baseball. So I did all this walk with nothing, no Jesus, no family. I couldn't really turn to my mom or dad because they were always kind of in each other's face. And like she said, I had a bad relationship. Somebody that I thought was who I was going to be with. My first love, which, kids, your first love is not before college. Just letting you know. Maybe, but probably not. It's a very small chance. So she broke my heart really badly right before I graduated high school. So there I was. Because my birthday was in August, I was 17. I was in my room. It was a July evening. I remember it very vividly. So I sat there and I was contemplating whether it mattered if I was around or not. I felt very worthless. Didn't have Jesus, had nothing. So I loaded my hunting rifle and I stuck the barrel in my mouth and I started pulling the trigger. And I very vividly, as Lauren would talk to me now, I heard stop. I heard stop, and I stopped. And I made a phone call. And I met the guy once, and I asked him, I was like, hey, what are you doing? And he has no idea what's going on. He goes, man, I'm playing Gran Turismo. Come on, this is the PlayStation days, right? So I went to his house, spent the night. We were together for 6 months afterwards, just hanging out. He saved my life and he didn't know it. Ended up being the best man at our wedding. 2 years later, still dealing with all that stuff, I meet her. And she had a very different walk. And she was vocal about being a Christian, and I very remember going, nah, I don't know what that is. I'm not interested, right? And Andy and Mindy, they were our premarital counselors. And on Friday night, which was our last meeting with them, I very much remember Andy telling me, almost quote, JT, I love you too much. This means too much to your future wife. I need to tell you about Jesus. And he did that with both hands on my shoulders. And we were standing in their entryway. And it was evening. It was a cold evening. And I remember he started talking to me about Jesus. And that night, I accepted Christ as my Lord and Savior. And I followed in believer's baptism with her in the water just a few months later. I still deal with frustration, but I no longer, since I gave my life to Jesus, I no longer feel those feelings. I no longer feel lonely. I no longer feel worthless. I still deal with self-worth at times. I mean, who doesn't? But I understand that when I met Jesus, I had a purpose in life. And for the longest time, I held my testimony back because of the shame. But somebody needs to hear it. It's okay to have those thoughts. Just don't live in them.
Something that I look back on is I see a clear pattern of control in my life, or trying to be in control, because of all these things I can't control, like my body or my anxiety or things that are going on around me. And I don't need to do that when I have God. God is in control. I don't need to be in control. That's what I've learned. We got married in 2003. We've been married about 6 years or so. I graduated college. And it was about the time where we probably started thinking about having babies. A lot of our friends started having kids.
And race cars.
Race cars?
And babies and race cars.
Well, yeah.
Race cars with baby seats.
Yeah, we can have both. So February 2010, we found out we were pregnant. I found out I was pregnant. We were pregnant. So went through all the first doctor's appointments, confirmed everything. So we get to the 8-week ultrasound.
Yeah.
And there's no heartbeat. It was devastating because I feel like once again my body let me down. My body betrayed me. My body didn't do what it was supposed to do. And went in the next week for just the regular follow-up appointment. It was not a regular follow-up appointment. We find out. I even went by myself because we thought it was just a regular appointment. That's when my doctor just nonchalantly tells me that I had a partial molar pregnancy. I'd never heard of that before. We had to look it up. He had to give me the pamphlet about it. It was partial, so there's an embryo, so we believe there was life, because we believe in life at conception. But there was also a tumor that was growing that made it to where the baby couldn't survive. It can turn into a cancer, so they had to monitor my levels, so they would make sure I wasn't developing a cancer. So I had to do weekly blood draws, but my levels weren't going down. So part of finding out we were pregnant was we decided to move into McKinney. We were living in Anna at the time. And to be closer to family, bigger house, it was really exciting. We decided to go ahead and move forward with the house, even after we lost the baby. But the day we were supposed to close on the house, I get a call saying, your levels keep going up. You need to go to the hospital right now and start chemo injections. I did injections for a week. Still, my levels kept going up. So, never in a million years thought I'd have an oncologist at the age of 30. He was a wonderful doctor. He helped us, but it took 3.5 more months to finish that journey. Injections every week, blood draws every week. So, but finally, 3.5 months later, my levels zeroed out, which was huge. Praise God.
Yeah.
But part of that story that I should have started with is the day I found out about the molar pregnancy, I was supposed to go to a women's retreat with our church. The lessons were about storms. We're always going into a storm, going through a storm, or coming out of a storm. And I needed to hear that too, because I felt like at that moment I was in the biggest storm I'd ever been in my life. So they asked for prayer requests, and I was able to mostly tell what I wanted to say through the tears. And this little 85-year-old lady, she laid her hand on my hand, and she told me, honey, nothing grows on the mountaintop. Everything grows in the valley. And you're in the valley right now. Because I just could not understand why God would take away this baby, and why I would have to have all these chemo injections, and why was I going through all this? I didn't want to do this. I just wanted the baby and the good moments. And so I realized then that storms, valleys, the same. We go through them, we're in them, or we come out of them. But that is where we grow in the valley. The valleys are lush. The valleys are where life is, and God is right there with us. We have mountaintop moments. We eventually had a mountaintop moment when our son was born in 2013.
Yes.
But I wouldn't have been appreciated that mountaintop moment as much if I hadn't gone through the valleys I went through and did all the growing I went through, and I feel like walked with God during those moments. I hope with my story that I can be an encouragement for other ladies and girls that have moments of feeling like you have to be perfect every day, or you have to achieve everything. You don't. You're beautiful as you are. You're perfect. You don't have to achieve absolute perfection. And if you don't get that baby right away, or if you don't find your perfect spouse right away,
or you're getting picked on, or you're getting bullied, or you don't feel like you're worth anything, Jesus is the way. Even this little boy that's lost in his room, crying his eyes out with a gun in his mouth, Jesus wanted to know exactly who that boy was. And for anybody out there dealing with any kind of depression, body images, there's a video out there that has really changed my perspective on things, and it's by the Skit guys called God's Chisel. I highly recommend people to watch it. It will change your view on yourself and how you view how God has a plan for you and loves you. And all of our tribulations and all of the trials we've been through, the storms, the mountains, the valleys, it has taught us one thing. We cannot do it without Jesus.